Hi, I appreciate you all joining us today for the fourth session of 20 for 20 in 2020, which, as some of you have come to know, is a special series that I've started doing to help people choose the right professionals to work with, to enable them to make important decisions and move forward on important matters in their lives. And this will help them do that in an effective way. I am Ella Newman, a trusted insurance advisor with the Norton Advisory Group. I help people find effective solutions to important components of their lives relating to estate, retirement, business succession, and long-term care planning, and help them achieve their goals in those areas. And at the end of the program, I'm going to talk to you about a fiduciary insurance review that I'm offering, but we'll talk about that later. Today, I will be speaking with Jacalyn Barnett, who is a matrimonial and family law attorney. And she is someone who has been in this practice for many years, who I originally met many years ago when I was a private banker at the Bank of New York, and have kept in touch with her ever since. And today, at this difficult time when we're in a pandemic and relationships have become so important, I thought it would be very impactful to have a conversation with her about concerns that we have at this point in time. And I'm very appreciative of her taking away from her busy schedule, since people are really seeking out her skills at this point. So, Jacalyn, are you ready to answer some questions and get started?
Ready as ever. Great to see you, Ella. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you in the midst of this very challenging time.
Well, thank you for being here. So we're going to get started. So my first question is, what is the primary focus of your legal practice?
I really call it anything involving love or sex and the law, because I deal with everything involving families, about children that are born in wedlock, out of wedlock, relationships, cohabitation. So everything that involves love and sex sort of falls under my umbrella.
That's terrific. This is going to be quite interesting then. What led you to this career path?
Well, it's really ridiculous, but when I was 17 and had just obtained my driver's license, I suddenly decided I wanted to get a pilot's license. And my parents said no, and I went to my room, made a list of my talents, which took 2 seconds, and realized that I played piano. And I started to teach piano in the neighborhood. I had 10 students within 2 weeks. And before long, I started to watch went into the family backgrounds. And having always wanted to be a lawyer since I was in 3rd grade, I then chose to be someone who would protect children. So I decided then that I would become a family lawyer. When I was in law school, I had the fabulous opportunity to work with a bankruptcy judge called John J. Galgay. And it was 1975 and the world was changing, and I had a front row seat to financial disaster. And because of that, I got jobs in the bankruptcy area and recognized the interrelationship between failure, or as I call the do-over, because I'm a huge fan of how you can do things over in life. And that's what bankruptcy afforded people. That's what marriage and remarriage afford people. So that's how I ended up in this field.
That's very interesting. And how has it changed since we first started practicing law?
Well, I graduated in 1977. And for family law in 1980, in fact, July 19, the equitable distribution law came into effect. So everything that I had been taught by my mother, such as if he loves you, he'll put the house in your name, suddenly became not of the same significance, because equitable distribution, it matters when things were acquired and how things were acquired, more than just the title in whose name it is held. And all of that has changed. And also now we have gay marriages, we have surrogacies, and science has changed the way we think about all our relationships, and grounds for divorce and everything else have changed in a period of time. It's been a very fascinating 40 years.
It sounds like it.
Mhm.
So what would you say are the reasons most people come to see you, and what types of problems do they have?
Well, most people come because they want to understand what their rights and responsibilities are under the law, depending on their situation. Whether they are about to get married, whether they're thinking about ending a marriage, whether something's happening to a member of their family, a child, a grandchild. They want to know what their rights are and what their rights aren't. They want to know what's the wrong thing to do, what's the right thing to do. And because each state has different rules, it's really important that you understand from someone who concentrates in this field what the law is today, where it's going to happen.
It sounds very logical.
Mhm.
What are the most common mistakes that people make before they come to see you?
I think the most common mistake is that they blurt out all of these angry thoughts and they escalate the situation. I think that it's really a great idea if people are having problems to try to seek therapy and also to get good financial advice to understand what they own, understand what they owe, how assets are held, what's their insurance, to really have the financial facts because unfortunately, all marriages end. Either someone walks out the door or is carried out. So you really need to understand what your finances are for any circumstance because something will always happen.
Mhm. That makes sense. Are there certain types of professionals that you recommend your clients use when you're working with them? And if so, why?
Well, first of all, therapists, because I think it's really important for people, if you're going to take the courage to have a divorce, to understand how you can make your life better and to understand so you don't repeat the same mistake and that you can be the best parent you can be. I also help them understand that what they discuss with a therapist is not confidential if they're going through a custody battle. So, a lot of things that people don't realize, I think that's why it's good if they speak to a lawyer earlier in the process. The next group of people are financial professionals, insurance brokers, financial advisors, accountants, trusts and estates. You really need to understand each silo, how it affects your life and your family's lives.
That makes sense. How do most of your clients find you?
Most of it, because I've been practicing for more than 40 years, is by word of mouth and former clients. And ironically, a lot of former clients' exes end up referring business. I
Oh,
really did not take to putting things up on social media and was resistant about even having a website because I'm so fierce about confidentiality, particularly about the famous clients. So while other people are very easy about saying those things, it took me a long time to feel comfortable even to put your name out there. So, but I'm very careful because what I deal with is so intimate that you have to be careful that you don't even say who you represent a lot of times.
right. That's very realistic.
Mhm.
Um, what is the hardest type of cases you have handled?
Custody relocation, because you can't settle with a child in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. If someone wants to move someplace and the other person wants to be in another location, it's very difficult to compromise about where a child should be. And you really have to figure out what is best for that particular child at that particular point in that child's life.
Hmm. Wow, that sounds complex. What does it mean when somebody says they have custody?
Well, that's such a great question because most people don't even understand what the word custody means. There's legal custody, which is making decisions. So, what school, what doctor, whether you take French or Spanish, whether you go to sleepaway camp or a teen tour, you don't have to physically be with the child to have legal custody. Physical custody is where a child puts their head on the pillow at night. So, people could have sole custody, joint custody, but what you're really asking is, are we talking about legal? Are we talking about physical? And sometimes there's even zones of responsibility where one person is in charge of education, the other person is in charge of religion, and the other person is in charge of medical. There's many combinations, and it really depends on what the needs of that particular family and that particular child would be at that point in time that it's determined.
I didn't realize it was that complex. Now,
Mhm.
what is no fault divorce?
No-fault divorce is until October 10th, 2010 in New York. We were the last state that stopped doing mudslinging. You had to have grounds for divorce, which meant you had to prove whether it was cruel and inhuman treatment where it made it unsafe to live together, or constructive abandonment. You had to prove that someone refused to have sex with you for an entire year, because in New York you were entitled to sex once a year, but you had to prove that you asked for it. We now have irretrievable breakdown for more than 6 months, which you would think would work for every single case, but sometimes I've had people that haven't been married 6 months, so they have to wait the 6 months till their irretrievable breakdown can count as a no-fault divorce.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What is a separation agreement?
Well, a separation agreement is when the two parties have a document which delineates what their rights and responsibilities are concerning where they're going to live, their property, their children, etc. And whenever you deal with a divorce, you either resolve it by having a judge make a decision and you have a judgment issued by the court, or somewhere along the line, you reach a separation agreement or a stipulation of settlement where you resolve the various terms. And those terms get incorporated but not merged into the judgment of divorce. So those are the terms by which you are divorced. But you could stay legally separated and never be divorced.
Oh.
People did that for religious reasons for many, many years.
Oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Do you provide free consultations?
I don't, and most matrimonial practitioners don't, because if you do, then you cannot represent the other person's spouse. So you could spend all of your time doing that, and then you'd be knocked out of representing people. So I don't do that.
I see. How are your fees determined, and when do you discuss that with a client?
The first time you meet them, you give them what the retainer agreement is, and it's based on an hourly rate. And so time is what matters. So the most important thing you also explain is, if someone is efficient in how they organize their records and how they use their time, that's how they can keep their legal fees down. If somebody gathers their records, puts them in chronological order, and does things in a systematic way, they're not only going to feel more emotionally in charge of their life, they're going to keep their professional bills down.
That's probably not the way most people realize that they should look at it. Let's see. How can a client keep the costs of the divorce down?
Besides organizing their records, I think it's all if they organize when they're going to speak with a lawyer, what their thoughts are. So it's not just stream of consciousness. Like if there are certain issues, in the same way that if you were going to see a doctor and you had a doctor's appointment, you oftentimes would bring a notepad and have what topics you wanted to raise so that you use the time efficiently, because you're talking about time. It's not a percentage of what the value of the assets are. It's about time. So you want to be efficient about it.
That's logical. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement?
Okay, well, a prenuptial agreement is before you say I do, you're delineating what you're saying I do too. So that's what a prenuptial agreement is. A postnuptial agreement is done after you're married, and what you're doing is you're saying, governing whatever those terms are. So for instance, sometimes someone will receive a very large inheritance, or someone needs to relocate for a job. And because of that, the two of them are saying, we have now agreed that we're going to deal with this issue in the following way, and they write a formal agreement that's done and properly notarized that could govern those terms. Some people, after they're married a certain period of time, want to modify their prenuptial agreement because of the changed circumstances. And you have a higher fiduciary responsibility when you're doing a postnuptial agreement because you're married than when you do a prenuptial agreement. And prenuptial and postnuptial agreements are more popular than ever.
Didn't know that. How long does a divorce usually take?
It really depends on what the issues are, because some people can solve the most complicated issues, but they're both on the same path and they do it very efficiently. I think that custody issues generally take the longest because if the two of them cannot agree, and then you have to get a court involved and you have to have forensics, those make cases take the longest. Financial issues, if you have to have appraisals done of complicated assets, that can take a long time. This pandemic obviously has made everything take longer and more challenges, as you can understand about everything.
Right. It has had an impact on many, many components of people's lives. So that leads us into the next question. How has the pandemic affected your practice?
I think it's been an explosion because from the moment things started, people that thought the golden years with someone were going to be, oh, we're going to have this in common and that in common, suddenly realized what wasn't there any longer. And the stress of being with someone 24/7, the fantasy about what they thought it was, and realizing also, is this what I want to do with the rest of my life? Many people have used this time to reflect on changing their careers, not just changing their relationships. Going through this experience made me, in fact, even more committed that this is what I want to do with my life than ever, as some of my friends have chosen to retire. And then there are people that suddenly found in new relationships that they found a life partner that they never, would have gotten this fast with. But the pandemic gave them the opportunity to really get to know each other in the trenches.
Hmm.
So I think it's changed a lot of things and made you clean out not just your closets, but your emotional closets.
Very well put. What is your philosophy and approach versus that of other attorneys?
Well, the key thing for me is defeating a problem, not the other person. So what I like to do is figure out what is the issue between the parties rather than making it a battle of who could be the biggest gladiator. If you could defeat the problem, then everybody wins. And that's what you should try to strategize.
Makes sense. What can you tell me about yourself that we cannot find out on the internet?
Um, well, you probably wouldn't find out about my major obsession with my dogs. And in fact, my late dog, Cappuccino. So one of the custody problems that really is sacred to my heart are when people have issues involving their pets, because while legally pets are property, I mean, they're the most sacred family members. And I truly, my late dog was a soulmate that opened my heart about so many things and taught me a lot. And that I wonder if maybe I'd had a puppy when I was young, if maybe I would have wanted to protect puppies as well as children. So I think that's something people wouldn't have expected. But I think the one group of beings that have profited from this pandemic are the puppies, as the shelters are emptied. And even my own daughter adopted a puppy. So I got to be a grandma to a puppy finally. So that's pretty exciting.
Very sweet. I think it's also a very nice situation for young toddlers who have their parents around more that might not have had them around before. And it's a similar situation to being a puppy in a family. In any case, our last question.
I think that really is true, but I also think you wonder about the socialization that some of
That,
the children are
right.
missing. That's part of the normal fabric of growing up, and you wonder what the consequences are. And I worry very much about children that have learning disabilities, because a disproportionate number of the families that I deal with in divorce have children with learning disabilities, and the stress and difficulties of that have oftentimes led to divorce. And I see the problems of Zoom not really meeting the special needs of these children.
It's true. I think this whole situation is going to have a difficult impact on children in general,
Yes.
not only grown-ups, as we know. Okay, so
You become grown-ups if things work out the right way.
right. So now looking back on the decades you have been practicing, what is the best part of your practice that you would not have expected?
The privilege and opportunity to learn about so many eclectic professions. The variety of people that I've represented are from all walks of life, and to know them in such a profoundly intimate way that their best friends may not even know has been a surprise. And so many of my former clients have ultimately become dear friends. I've gotten to go to weddings and their children's weddings and, you know, celebrated milestones in their life that are outside of courthouse. And that really has been one of the delights of life and one of the surprises of life.
That's a terrific answer. I really enjoyed hearing that. Well, Jacalyn, this has been amazing, and I really thank you for taking the time to let us learn about you, your practice, your clients, your profession, and your whole being. And
my puppy.
And your puppy. And if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Well, my email address is jbarnett, BARNETT, at Jacalyn, which is spelled this way because of my mother, JACALYNBARNETT.com. And I look forward to hearing from any of your listeners, because there are always answers to love. And some of the questions are just such great surprises. And the answers oftentimes can be obvious, but when you're in the midst of it, you just don't see it.
That makes sense. So I just wanted to get back to what I mentioned at the very, very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And if people have not reviewed their insurance in the last 3 or 4 years, it is really an important time for them to do that because of the current economic situation, changes in interest rates, other changes that may take place as a result of the election, that new laws and other activities will be taking place next year. They really need to review their insurance. And so if they reach out to me at ella@nortonadvisorygroup.com, I'm happy to give them a complimentary review of their insurance and have a discussion and prepare them for the changes that will be coming, and we can set up a virtual appointment. Also, I'm hoping that I will be able to get to see everybody, and people should be on the lookout for the next 20 for 20 in 2020. And I will see you all on LinkedIn. And please go to our websites, go to Jacalyn's website and my website. And in the meantime, stay healthy and make arrangements to vote. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ella. Can I add one other? Can I add one thing about insurance?
Yes.
Saying, so you could edit just saying.
Okay.
What's so important about insurance in these circumstances are when people have support obligations because of a divorce, it's imperative that they seek and obtain life insurance because dead people don't pay. So you need to have life insurance. So it's very important when someone's exploring a divorce that they make sure that they have appropriate life insurance to cover their support obligations.
That makes sense. Thank you for adding that. Okay, and now we'll be signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.